Ever since the Xbox Series X and S and PlayStation 5 systems launched, it hasn't exactly been the easiest thing to get your hands on. Of course, these systems are released at premium price points of $500 for the disc-based PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X, which are the two systems that we'll be focusing on in this video. And 500 bucks, you know, that's a lot of money, but there's a lot of gamers who are willing to spend that amount of money. It's just that the supply issues for these systems has been ridiculous, to say the least. Obviously, the pandemic had a big impact on that. The fact that these systems released and essentially there was nobody buying stuff in stores, everything was done online. Scammers, botters, all these people bought them up, tried to sell them at ridiculously high prices. And even since then, we've seen a drip feed of new consoles for these systems released. It's been ridiculously hard to get your hands on these systems still. Shout outs to people like Jake Randall, who are trying to get people Xbox Series X or PlayStation 5 systems who really want them, because without people like Jake, you probably wouldn't own one. I personally got lucky, pre-ordered both of these from Walmart when they were first unveiled, and managed to get my hands on them. But maybe you're still in the market for the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5. You haven't had a chance to buy one yet. You've been saving up your money and thinking, well, you know, maybe now is the time. The supply issues are seemingly becoming a little bit better, I would say. Even though there are still tons of people that aren't able to get one, there are more opportunities. And if you're an opportunistic person, you could definitely take advantage of this. Maybe you'll even pay a scalper premium price on eBay, since those are going down as well. But maybe you should wait. If you've waited this long already, maybe you should wait a bit longer, because it seems like there are already successors for these systems being worked on, and it seems like companies are already well aware of this situation. Now, I'm going to put up an image right now that happened at the latest TCL conference. Now, if you don't know who TCL is, I mean, you probably should. If you have a lot of TVs, you probably own a TCL television. I know I own one in the basement. They're cheap televisions. They do have more premium systems. They do have more premium televisions with a lot of bells and whistles and all that stuff. But really, it's a great entryway into the baseline of what future gaming is going to be based on, with 4K and up scalability for images. Now, you're not getting the same image quality as something like OLED with their base models, but still, they're a very attractive price point, so a lot of people end up buying these. Well, TCL held a presentation today, and a lot of people are now talking about this, so I kind of want to talk about it myself, because I find this very interesting. Maybe you should indeed wait a little bit for picking up your PlayStation 5 or Xbox Series X or S if you have not already. So looking at this image here, you can see that, of course, in generation 9.0 in 2020, we had the Xbox Series S/X launch, and of course we had the PlayStation 5 launch. Essentially, you see there what the specs are of these systems, you know, up to 4K, 120 frames per second, ultra high definition stuff, up to 120 frames per second, GPUs used in these systems. But then you look right next door, and this guy kind of looks like Alan Hahn. If you follow sports, you might know who Alan Hahn is. Is that you, Alan Hahn? I don't know. It's probably not. But we have generation 9.5 coming in 2023/2024 with a new Xbox Series S/X, a PlayStation 5 Pro, and now look at the specs of everything. Everything has been increased. We now have 2160p as the baseline with 60 to 120 hertz. We have Ultra HD at 8K with 60 to 120 hertz output as well for that. We have a new GPU in this system. Now, a lot of people have been looking at this and thinking, well, this is much ado about nothing. There's no way that this is actually a thing. But looking at what Xbox has done and what PlayStation has done, this makes a lot more sense than I think you realize. Now, let's go back to the whole thing about supply issues. And what was the main thing with the supply issues? Of course, was pandemic stuff, talking about things like chip shortages. All of these systems were running on these chip shortages. And of course, since then, it's been very problematic to make these systems. But if Xbox and PlayStation, Sony by extension, decide to pivot away from the standard chips that they're using now and use maybe a proprietary chip or something that's a little bit more easily to get off the shelf, and then utilize that in these new quote unquote new systems that they're releasing, it can make things a lot easier for consumers to get your hands on. And they could still charge a premium price point, maybe even a little bit above the $500 we're seeing, but get more performance out of it. Now, the performance aspect of things is another very interesting thing, because when you're talking about things like the Xbox One X and the PlayStation 4 Pro, both systems that were essentially what they are saying these systems are going to be. So it's historically what these companies do, even though that's what we want Nintendo to do with the Switch. These companies actually have proof of them doing things like this before. What does that say about the games they're going to be releasing? Well, I mean, let's be real. Most of the games that we have seen have been scalable games anyways. Most of the PS5 games that have released have a PS4 version of the game. And the PS5 exclusive games, a lot of people say to themselves, well, I feel like this could have ran on the PlayStation 4. I'm looking at you, Ratchet and Clank. Fantastic game, a very visually pleasing game. But I feel like a PlayStation 4 version could have easily been done. I don't really feel like it's something that only the power of the PlayStation 5 can handle, as Jim Ryan said. The Xbox, I mean, hell, look at Xbox. Everything they're still making comes out on the Xbox One anyways, and that system really wasn't a huge success for them. So the scalability of games is becoming more and more prevalent, because more and more games are running on platforms or systems or even PCs that they really shouldn't have been doing, because of things like DLSS technology and artificial upscaling done by the computers of these systems that allow you to have things like higher resolutions and higher frame rates. And then couple that with the fact that they could essentially, these companies could essentially fix their supply issues by using a manufactured proprietary chip or just using a different chip that's more readily available. This makes a lot more sense than I think you realize, than I think a lot of people realize. We all want Nintendo to release a Switch Pro. We want them to do something like that, a more beefed up Switch system, and I definitely think they will. But I wouldn't be surprised if something like that happens to launch right alongside of a revised PlayStation 5, a PlayStation 5 Pro or Slim or something like that, because God, that system is massive. Same thing with the Xbox Series X. The Xbox Series X looks like a freaking chimney tower, and the heat just kind of comes out of the top of it because it's absolutely ridiculous. But I think a lot of people are going to look at this and be like, oh, well, what is TCL now? They don't know anything. But I feel like one of the largest TV manufacturers in the world probably has a direct connection with companies like Microsoft and Sony when it comes to their upcoming products. Were they supposed to say something about this? Probably not, but they can always fall back on the, oh, this is just something we're speculating on. We don't know this for sure. But I definitely think there's a lot more meat to this situation than the average person will realize. You're struggling to get a PlayStation 5. You're struggling to get an Xbox Series X. But if they can make revised models that are easily available versus those systems, market them in a way that makes them more attractive, have them alongside of those systems, and then all of these systems play the same games, just these new systems play them a little bit better, is that really something that is going to work? And I feel like, you know, potentially. So if you're planning on getting a PlayStation 5 or an Xbox Series X, you honestly might want to wait a little bit. You know, take all of these things into consideration. Do you have something like a 4K OLED television or even an 8K television to utilize what these new systems are going to be? If you do, and the library of games isn't interesting enough for you to want to spend a scalper price, you might just want to wait a little bit. You might want to wait a little bit to see what ends up happening with these systems. And if you can no longer take the wait, then of course upgrade. But let's be realistic. For most people, upgrading to a PlayStation 5 over a PlayStation 4, upgrading to an Xbox Series X over an Xbox One, it really hasn't been all that fruitful. All of the games pretty much have been available on both systems. So why did we need all this new hardware? Well, it runs things a little bit better, it's fancier, and you want to show off your new system. You want to have the newest toys and be the new kid on the block with the hottest toys because, you know, it's sort of a pride issue, I feel. But realistically speaking, I don't know if it's quite worth the upgrade quite yet. And we're coming up on, you know, almost over 2 years of these systems. So let me know what you think of this stuff in the comments section down below. Do you think TCL is just talking out their ass, or do you think that there is something to this? Because honestly, I do. And if you are in the market for a PlayStation 5 or an Xbox Series X, if you're buying it for yourself, you might want to wait a little bit. If you're buying it for like your son or your daughter or your kid or whatever, you know, good luck explaining that to them. As always, guys, thank you for checking out this video. I know I wasn't on camera today. I was taking a day off of life. I have a headache. I'm just kind of relaxing, but this came up. I had to talk about it. So enjoy the video. Share it around if you enjoyed it. Hit that subscribe button if you're new. And as always, I'll catch you guys on the next video. Later.